Hi there, Jake Miller here, and today I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a class in Google Classroom. It's a pretty straightforward process, but some people like to have a video that walks them right through how to do it, so I'm going to provide that to you right here. The first thing you're going to want to do is navigate to the Google Classroom page. Now, if you need to type it into your web browser, it's classroom.google.com. You also might be able to access it by clicking on the apps waffle, I call it, over here on the right, and selecting Classroom in this list if you do see it there. Otherwise, classroom.google.com works. If it's your first time coming into Classroom, you're going to need to select whether you're a student or a teacher. Don't worry about your students accidentally selecting teacher, because if we find out that happens, a Google admin in your district can easily change them back to student. Not a big deal. Obviously, you're going to click Teacher, and that's going to bring you to this next page here where you create your first class. And so this gives you a little introduction to Classroom, and you'll click this plus up here to create your first class. Your students will see a similar screen when they click Student, and if they're not already assigned to their classes, they would click this plus to join a class and then type in their class code. Now in your district, your Google Apps admin for your district may use a process to create everyone's Google Classrooms for the teachers. Kind of depends on if your district expects all teachers to use it or just encourages it for those who want to. If they just encourage it for those who want to, then the teachers probably wanted to set it up on their own. We are going to click that plus and click Create Class. And then there's three different things you could add to a class. The only one you have to add is a class name. But for high school teachers and middle school teachers, you'll want to probably have sections as well. And it might be helpful for your students if you include subjects there. So I might write in here, writing class, section 1, because it's my first period class, and subject is English Language Arts. And you see it gives me a list of different predictive ones down here, but I can make my own as well if I want to. Okay, and then I click Create, and then it's going to bring us to the main page of that class. Okay, and you notice it's going to allow you to go through a tour here of how to communicate with your class. It's a really great tool to just follow along with whatever Google pops up with and teaches you about. So it first shows you that this plus allows you to communicate with your class in a number of different ways. And if I get this guy out of the way here, I'll see those hover over. Create announcement, create assignment, create a question, and reuse a post, which is a nice feature that Google added last year, is that once you've done things once, you can then just reuse those quality posts. So you can really focus on what's important, which is your interaction with your students. Now, if you've used Google Classroom before and you still have classes in here, you'll see a screen similar to this where you see all of your classes laid out in the background, and then selecting on them brings you into the screen that I just showed to you. And if this is your first time in this school year, you will probably see this updated window pop up here telling you about what's new in Classroom. It has 4 of the major posts, or major updates. The big one is the ability to keep parents and guardians in the loop with what's happening in Classroom. But there's more, and I do recommend clicking Learn More and learning about all the new features in Classroom. If you've used Classroom before, you'd want to know about the things that they've added to the mobile apps and to Classroom in general on the computer. This is a great way to learn about them by reading down through here. You can even bookmark this page and come back to it as time goes on and see, as they add new things, what are those new things that they're adding in. And this is just a great resource to learn about all the things that Classroom has involved in it. Now, if you have classes in here from last year, you're going to want to archive those classes so that you no longer see them on this screen and your students no longer see them on this screen. That doesn't mean the class is gone, so you can go back and access those assignments and what happened and student submissions and your wording of different things, and reuse those posts, but you want to take it out of here so your students are no longer seeing it on their Classroom screen, assuming that they now have teachers that are also using Classroom. So you click that archive button there. Now the next thing you want to do is actually get your class ready for students to get into it and learn in it, and that involves setting things up inside of it. Note that from this screen you could always edit your actual class, change the name of it, change the section number of it, add a section number, add a subject, change a subject, and things like that. And also you can always click the 3 lines up here, what I like to call the hamburger, to get back to your list of classes, or to see them all down the side here and access them quickly once you have multiple classes in here. Once you jump in, one thing you might want to change is the theme of your class, which gives it the color and the background photo here. You could select the theme from here. Pretty self-explanatory, so I'll skip over it. And you could upload a photo. Also pretty self-explanatory, so I'll skip over that as well. Now, there are 3 main parts to your Google Classroom. The first and most important one is the stream. This is where your students will go and you will go to see a essentially live stream in chronological order of everything that's happening and happened in your class. And you could see, as we saw earlier, you could add to that stream announcements, which are just informational posts, assignments, polling questions, or you could reuse old posts. And it gives you a little example here, if this is your first time in this class, that you could attach materials such as YouTube videos to your posts and other things as well. And you could let students view or edit the same materials in Google Docs or have their own copies of Google Docs in the stream here. You also could turn on and off whether or not you see deleted items. Your students will not, but you will. In case a student deletes something inappropriate, you'll see that it was deleted. And over here on the left, you and the students both see a list of any work that is due soon. So it looks a little bit different for you as the teacher than it does as the student, but it gives you a great view of it. So that is the stream. You also in the middle have the students section, which also nowadays involves something called the Guardian email summary section. So you could go through here to add parent emails or guardian emails in, and they could receive daily or weekly summaries of student work. We want to keep in mind that those summaries are not actual grades and things like that, because Google Classroom is not a grade book. It's just a learning management system. But we can cover how to do guardian email summaries in a different video. The next thing you want to pay attention to in your students list is how you plan to get your students into here. Now, there are three possible ways. One is that your Google admin in your district may have set it up to automatically add students in. If they did, great, your job is done there, except maybe to proof the list and make sure everybody's included. It's really not that difficult of a process if they didn't, so I wouldn't sweat it. You have two other options in that situation. One is to invite students. I really don't recommend this just because it puts more work on your end, but what you do if you're inviting students is you go in there and you type in student email addresses, and that could be tedious. Now, if you already have created a list of students in Google Email or in Gmail in your contact lists, then you could just click in that list and put the whole thing in there. Otherwise, if you're typing in, I don't really think it's worth it unless maybe you're dealing with, K through 2 graders. Any older students, you might as well just use the access code that they give you here. It's always a seven-digit and letter code. Write it up on your chalkboard. Tell them to go classroom.google.com. Click join and type in this code. Very simple, and then you'll see who's there and who's not. And if you missed anybody, then you could just invite those 1 or 2 students. Notice that if for some reason something happens with your class code where you get the wrong students in it, or students in your school are messing around and trying to join it, you can come over here and reset the code or disable the code or anything like that. You also have some choices in here which you might want to think about as to whether or not you want your students to be able to post and comment, or only comment, or only, the students can't really do anything except complete work in here. I personally prefer the top option, which is the least restrictive, but I can see a path to success being starting with most restrictive, and then after they understand that part, then letting them comment on your posts, and then after they are doing that appropriately, letting them move up to posting and commenting. And it is also important to know that if you go with the least restrictive one here, you can limit specific students, and even just temporarily, if they do things inappropriate. So if you let all the students post and comment, one student does something that's out of line, you could delete that post, and you could click to make that student unable to post. And then after a while, and after that student has shown they've learned their lesson, you give them that access again to learn from. Also notice that in here you have the ability to email all of your parent guardians. So once you've added those parents, you could click and send them a really quick email, which is really fantastic that they get these summaries regularly, and that you could also just email them a reminder when you need to. The next thing you want to look at, and one that's important to look at before you actually start your class, is the About section, and that's something you really want to format before you get your class up and going. Down the left side, you should see your profile over here. You could change this picture just in your regular Google settings, not inside of Google Classroom. You could also invite other teachers here should you have a classroom aide or paraprofessional or student teacher or intervention specialist or gifted specialist that you're working with. That would be a way to get them involved in the class, and then they could see and actually collaborate in the teaching of the class here. Down the center, you see some more important stuff, and this is kind of like your syllabus for your class. So you have a spot to put in a title, a spot to put in a class description, a spot to identify a room for the class. Now, if you leave these blank, they just won't show up in the student view. A link to your Google Drive folder, which I didn't create that. It was automatically created by Google Classroom, so your students will see that as well. So that's just a nice handy link for you or your students to click on About and jump right into that folder and see their work from the class, or for you to see the work you've assigned and have had handed in to you within the class. A new feature in Google within the last year was the addition of Calendar, which was something that people really were hoping for when Google Classroom came out. Now you can see a calendar in Google Classroom, and finally you can also link it into Google Calendar, which is really awesome because a student or the teacher from their mobile devices can now see, without going into the Classroom app, see their homework assignments or their tests or quizzes or their activities listed right in their calendar, along with all of their other to-dos and things like that. You may also want to add some class materials down here for your students to have access to regularly. If you don't add anything, they just won't see anything down there. It won't look like you didn't add anything. It'll just be blank. This is more, whereas your stream is the day-to-day updates of the class, the About is the stuff you want your students to be regularly aware of and have access to. So down here under Add Class Materials, you can add things like attachments from your computer. So that means a file you have on your computer that you want to upload. Nowadays, I hope you're moving to having most of your stuff on Google Drive, but it's an option they have there for you. And then the next one is a Google Drive file of any type. You can put up there a YouTube video that you'd like to include, or a link to a certain web page. Nice to be able to link maybe the school's web page or the site where grades are recorded and kids go to look at their grades and things like that. One thing to note is I could include multiple resources. So if I do this as resource 1, then underneath it I can add a second resource. Okay, so I get, or up above it. Or I can also put multiple things within one resource. So I could have that resource and then add a separate link. Okay, so I could have a resource that has 2 different things in it so that the students can see those go together for whatever reason. Okay, so that is how to set up a class in Google Classroom. So again, the basics, you want to go to classroom.google.com. If you've never been in before, go in as a teacher, and then click the plus up at the top, click Create a Class, go ahead and give your class a name and all that important information. Decide how you're going to invite your students to the class, or get your students into the class, set up your About page for the class, and then get your students in, and you're ready to start using it. And we'll talk about that in the next video.